Hello and welcome to our webinar, Assessing Basic Concept Knowledge for School Readiness. Our presenter today is Dr. Bruce A. Bracken. We also have Nancy Castilleja, our Pearson Senior Product Manager, Shannon Wang, our Pearson Principal Research Director, and Patricia Ibarra, our Pearson Senior Research Director with us today, and they will monitor the Q&A for Dr. Bracken. Please note that there is some bad weather in the Northeast. If we cut out, please stay on the line and we'll come back as soon as possible. The webinar is presented in broadcast audio. Please turn up your computer speakers as there are no dial-in options. We are also presenting with closed caption. To initiate closed caption on your computer screen, please click on the box marked CC, click on Live Transcript, and select Show Subtitle. The webinar handout will be posted in the chat box. Please download the document during the live presentation. Please type your questions, concerns, and comments into the Zoom Q&A. The chat box is not monitored for content. Please note that the hand raise has also been disabled for this webinar. We will answer questions live, time permitting. If your question is not answered during the live presentation, please fill out the follow-up form in the link that will pop up after the webinar. Webinar certificates of attendance will be automatically emailed to you within 3 weeks. The webinar recording will also be posted on our website within 3 weeks. Please do not close your browser at the conclusion of the webinar. If you have questions that were not answered or you wish to speak to a representative, there is a form you can complete and we will follow up with you. With that being said, I will turn it over to Dr. Bracken.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending this webinar on basic concept acquisition and the Bracken Basic Concept Scale and the Bracken School Readiness Assessment. We have stuck screen already. There we go. We have a few disclosures we need to make, and one of them is financial, and that is that because I'm the author of the Bracken Basic Concept Scale and the School Readiness Assessment, I receive a royalty for the sale of these assessments. I am not being paid for the webinar. That is to help support the product, and because I am an advocate and unabashed, fervent proselytizer about the importance of preschool assessment and the assessment of and acquisition of basic concepts. A friend of mine asked me once, fairly recently, about what is the difference between my Bracken Basic Concept Scale and a typical picture vocabulary test that's used in the preschool age range. And I pointed out to him that the words that are assessed on a picture vocabulary test are random age-graded words that have no relevance necessarily to education. They're just vocabulary words that are age-graded by difficulty level. And they're words like bus and parachute and umbrella. Nothing specific or nothing very helpful for education. But what the Bracken Basic Concept Scale measures, and the importance of basic concepts in this context, is that if a child can identify what a bus is on a picture vocabulary test, he has rudimentary knowledge of that. He was able to pick it out. But if he understands the basic concepts that are on the Bracken Basic Concept Scale, he can tell you that that bus is a long yellow and black vehicle that's made of metal, glass, and rubber. It carries children to and from school. It has stairs that allow the children to go up into the bus and down out of the bus. A door opens and closes on the bus. And inside the bus, there are approximately 15 rows of seats that will accommodate 60 students. And some of those students may be young, some may be old. And the bus is typically driven by a man or a woman who is generally happy to see the children each morning. What I just discussed was a whole list of basic concepts that really embody what a bus is. A picture vocabulary test really shows you that a child can recognize a bus, but concepts provide the context for defining what a bus is. It's the connective tissue that holds a child's full understanding of the concept of a bus together. So that's the primary difference between a vocabulary test and a measure of basic concepts. Basic concepts provide the elegant language that is used daily by children to understand their environment. And with that stage setting, let's talk about the Bracken Basic Concept Scale. The outcomes you'll receive today from this presentation are basically three. And one is that you'll be able to explain basic concept comprehension and how it's related to children's understanding of classroom conversations, teachers' directions, and school curricula. You'll also be able to explain why and how concept development is a powerful predictor of overall language development, cognitive functioning, and school readiness. And you'll be able to explain how concept attainment can be integrated into your traditional assessment battery. The agenda for today's webinar is, first, I'll talk about the importance of basic concepts in child development, including language, cognitive, and school readiness. I'll provide an overview of concept development issues, and I'll talk about BBCS and BSRA administration and scoring, and how to integrate those concept results into the comprehensive assessment battery. And the Q&A will take place through the portal that was already discussed by Sherry. So let's talk about the importance of basic concepts. First of all, let's define what a basic concept is. A basic concept is a word in its most elementary sense that is a label for one of the basic colors, comparatives, directions, materials, positions, quantities, relationships, sequences, shapes, sizes, social or emotional states and characteristics, textures, and time. Basic concepts are basic in the sense that they represent the most rudimentary concepts in these specific categorical areas. The well-known developmental psychologist from Harvard University, Jerome Kagan, deceased, once wrote that concepts are the foundation of intelligence. And I'll point out later in this presentation how strong the relationship is. You need to understand as well that concepts come in multiple levels, beginning with basic concepts and then topical concepts and overarching concepts. Teachers frequently jump right into the topical concepts. So if they're teaching social studies and they're teaching about environments and they're talking about deserts and marshes and jungles and oceans, they teach the concepts that are topical related to those environmental conditions. Many of the teachers, though, fail to recognize that many of the students in their class don't understand the rudimentary words that are needed in order to understand what a topical concept is. So they have to be able to know what rough is and hot and blue and liquid if they're talking about deserts and oceans, for example. And overarching concepts are more inclusive, and they cover everything that embodies the basic and the topical concepts. And they typically will include such things as total environments and patterns and systems within environments. To discuss the importance of basic concepts, let's consider that basic concepts are in fact the foundational terms used to describe children's everyday world. These are the words that we use and children use to describe what's going on around them. Basic concepts are important to vocabulary development, especially for young students who are most at risk for school failure. And they're cognitively more complex and functional than the common vocabulary terms in the example I used with the school bus, for example. Newman in 2006 concluded that low-income preschool children need concept-rich instruction, including knowledge of words and, importantly, the concepts that connect them. I referred to that connection as the connective tissue. Basic concepts are also needed to understand classroom conversations and teacher directions. Many children who appear to be misbehaving often don't understand the concepts that the teacher used when she said, for example, never get out of your seat without permission. If they didn't understand the word never, then they appear to be misbehaving. Basic concepts predict reading, math, and other subject areas better than do traditional vocabulary tests. And basic concepts, importantly, are needed to understand not the intelligence tests or the achievement tests items per se, but the directions to those tests. If a child does not understand the concepts that are in test directions, they won't be able to pass the items, even if they could understand what it is they were supposed to do. Basic concepts are highly relevant educational terms. As I said earlier, they're not simple age-graded words found on common vocabulary tests. These are the connective tissue that holds those vocabulary words together. Concepts are also central to early childhood educational standards across all 50 states. I'll show a little bit later how that connection is made and the extent to which concepts are included in state standards for early childhood education. And concepts have been mapped, categorized, and effectively assessed and remediated in an evidence-based methodology for more than 4 decades. Unfortunately, that methodology and that remediation and the evidence-based procedures is not widely known. So I had said that basic concepts have powerful correlations with comprehensive tests of intelligence, cognition, and overall ability. They also have very strong correlations with language, vocabulary, and early educational skills. And they're highly related to achievement and school readiness. And you might ask, why is that the case? I taught preschool assessment for approximately 40 years, and I always emphasize that the measures that we have in preschool assessment often are not very predictive. Sorting puzzle pieces, or putting a puzzle together, or stacking blocks, or stringing beads, or rhyming words typically do not have strong predictive ability because they're not cognitive, they're physical. Same with standing on one foot, or jumping or throwing, all important activities for preschool children to learn, but they're not cognitive tasks. It's the cognitive tasks, like learning basic concepts, that have the cognitive complexity that predict future cognitive and academic outcomes. That's the primary reason why basic concept acquisition is so important. Over the years, we looked at the correlations of the Bracken Basic Concept Scale with various tests of ability, tests of achievement, and tests of language. What we have here is a page that shows the correlations between the BBCS and Stanford Binet, 0.91 correlation. In that particular study, we did a factor analysis, and we found that the BBCS actually had a stronger G loading for general intelligence than did the Binet at that age level. We have a 0.85 correlation with the WIPSI, 0.8 with the differential ability scales, and the language reduced KABC, the correlation was 0.57. Correlations with achievement tests, 0.67 to 0.81 with the Metropolitan Readiness Test, 0.65 with the Woodcock-Johnson, 0.64 with the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, the achievement portion, 0.5, 0.6 with the RAT, the Wide Range Achievement Test, and with the Wyatt, correlations of 0.42 to 0.74. Language and vocabulary tests. The BBCS correlates 0.78 to 0.88 with the BAME test of basic concepts, 0.67 to 0.88 with the PPVT, 0.61 to 0.78 with the preschool language scale, and 0.68 with the token test. Keep in mind that the correlations that I just showed indicate that the BBCS correlates with the intelligence tests as highly as intelligence tests correlate with each other. The BBCS correlates with achievement tests as highly as intelligence tests correlate with achievement tests. And the BBCS correlates as well with language and vocabulary tests as intelligence tests correlate with language and vocabulary tests. The point is that the basic concepts assessed on the BBCS are very cognitively oriented, very conceptual, and very contextual. There's some assumptions about basic concept development that we need to discuss. First is that there's the assumption that all children enter school knowing important basic concepts. If these concepts are so basic, most kids must know them by the time they go to school, right? Well, that's not the case. What we find is that preschool intelligence tests are replete with basic concepts that children do not understand. They don't understand the directions to the test. They can't pass the items. And they also, the assumption is that the early childhood achievement tests are replete with basic concepts that children do not understand. And importantly, children do not understand the basic concepts commonly used in classroom directions and discussions. Let's take an example of that. Let's say a teacher used this directive to a student standing out in the hall, 5-year-old. She says to the child, first open the classroom door, next go to the center of the room. Afterward, look carefully before you decide where to sit down, and never sit across from the doorway. 4 simple sentences. If we look at the concepts within those sentences, we see that there are the concepts of first, open, next, center, afterward, before, down, never, and across. Well, if children come to school knowing all of those basic concepts, they should have no problem understanding that teacher's directions. So let's see how many of those concepts children know at that age. Well, 99% would know to open the door. They understand open. 5-year-olds do, 99%. Sitting down is also not a problem. 88% of the students would know what the teacher meant when she said sit down. But when the direction comes, I want you to do this first and then do this next, only 60% of the students know what first means and 59% know what next means. When she said don't sit across from the doorway, only 55% of the 5-year-olds know what across means. Only 50% know what to do before something, and 48% know the center of the room. And importantly, 30% of the students, that means 70% of the students, do not understand what the word never means, even though they can sometimes figure it out in context. 30% of the students do not, or 30% of the students know what never means, and only 25% know what afterward means. So that collection of 4 sentences creates a conceptual problem for young children who do not understand those concepts and did not come to school already knowing them. We also have the assumption that children begin school on an equal conceptual footing. So even though some concepts are not known by age 5, all the students are in the same situation, and that's not the case. We know that children of poverty know fewer basic concepts than more economically advantaged students. We know that children who speak English as a second language know far fewer basic concepts in English than their native language or native English speakers. And we know that children with speech and language, hearing, vision, and cognitive disabilities know far fewer basic concepts than non-disabled students. But not to worry, schools systematically teach these concepts, right? So even though the kids come in with a range of knowledge and a lot of Swiss cheese holes in their knowledge, the schools are going to take care of that. Well, that's not the case either. None of the states, of the 50 states, early childhood educational standards include all or even most of the concepts assessed on the Bracken Basic Concept Scale. Schools typically do not follow a systematic conceptual map or proven pedagogy for teaching basic concepts, though that pedagogy has been available for over 40 years. And basic concepts are usually taught with little consideration for the empirically derived scope and sequence of concept development. We know which concepts are acquired first. We know the sequence with which they're developed. But unfortunately, the schools typically do not follow that scope and sequence. Parents and teachers know what concepts to teach their children, right? Well, that's not the case either, unfortunately. Research has identified a wide spectrum of concepts that children need to describe and discuss their world and to follow others' directions. And many children come to school not knowing those. Parents often teach only the obvious concepts to their children prior to attending school. For example, a parent might say, "My child's getting ready for school. I need to make sure he knows his colors and his numbers and his letters." Parents and teachers often have misperceptions about the taxonomical nature of concept domains and subdomains. For example, primary colors and secondary colors and tertiary colors and absolute colors. I say this because I know adults, and you probably do too, who, if you ask them what are the primary colors, they would think that it's the 8 colors based in the Crayola basic crayon box. They wouldn't be able to name the primary colors, but a preschooler should be able to. And parents, importantly here, and parents often forget to address the essential social emotional concepts that are important as a part of school readiness and children's self-regulation. So what did we do to remedy some of these invalid assumptions? Well, we have the Bracken Basic Concept Scale, and we've updated it. We've expanded the age range down to 3 and up through 7 years, 11 months. We've updated the normative data from the US Census Bureau. We've created print edition that has been ongoing for the last almost 4 decades, and the new digital edition. We have updated items and artwork to reflect the current societal norms and culture. And we've stayed true to the original 1984 Bracken Basic Concept Scale by including representative pictures of children of all races and ethnicities and both genders doing non-stereotypical roles and positions. The school readiness composite now includes self and social awareness subtest. We moved that subtest into the school readiness composite because of the importance of concepts related to self-regulation and emotion for school readiness. We updated the start points based on the child's chronological age, and we enhanced the basal and ceiling rules to maintain a reasonable administration time, even with 38 new concepts added. We've improved the floors and the ceilings so that the test is sounder at both levels. We wanted to do that to improve the identification of children who have developmental delays and or those who are academically and intellectually gifted. We identified STEAM concepts throughout the test, those foundational concepts emphasized in science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curricula. And we have the Spanish translation of the BBCS record form and the concept development guide. I mentioned that there is the new digital format for the administration of the BBCS, and the digital format will be available early 2023, possibly as early as March. There are 2 features or 2 products. One is the Q Global digital stimulus books that can be used for in-person or remote test administration. The scores from the Q Global can be entered into the scoring program to obtain a printed report. And then we have the Q Interactive, where we have 2 iPads that are connected by Bluetooth, and one for the examiner, one for the examinee, to present, view, and respond to test stimuli. This provides an automated scoring that follows the examinee's responses. Here's an example of a Q Interactive item. The child on his or her iPad indicates the answer to this question. Look at all the pictures. Show me where it is morning. And on the examiner's iPad, it shows the child's response and the correctness of the response. BBCS-4 measures 320 concepts across 10 categories. The original BBCS back in 1984 measured 258 basic concepts. So we've significantly extended and expanded the number of concepts assessed. The first 6 subtests are comprise the school readiness scale: colors, letters, numbers, sizes and comparisons, shapes, and self and social awareness. Each of those subtests combine to create a scale, and you'll get a scale score for the combination of those 6 subtests. Self and social awareness is a long subtest, and it had relatively long, and it had its place outside of the school readiness composite previously. Now you can score it and use it in either location, but it will provide subtest scores as the direction, position, texture, material, quantity, and time sequence. So out of the 320 basic concepts assessed on BBCS-4, 159 of those are associated with STEM items: early, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curricula for kindergarten through grade 2 age groups. BBCS takes 20 to 40 minutes to administer based on the child's abilities and age, and it provides you with all of the scores you're used to using if you're using standardized tests. The school readiness composite and the total test composite has a mean of 100 and standard deviation of 15, and it produces those standard scores plus percentile ranks and descriptive classifications. The subtests also produce scaled scores, as you're used to seeing with subtests, with a mean of 10 and standard deviation of 3. So in combination, the composites and the subtests produce scaled scores, percentile ranks, age equivalents, growth scale values, descriptive classifications, and percent correct for English or Spanish administration. The BBCS-4, separate product, but it's the first 6 subtests of the BBCS, or I should say the BSRA-4, is a separate product from the BBCS, but it comprises the 6 subtests on the BBCS, the first 6 subtests: colors, letters, numbers, sizes and comparisons, shapes, and self and social awareness. The BSRA has 134 concepts, 64 of which are associated with early science, technology, engineering, and math. It takes 15 to 20 minutes to administer, and it produces the scores that you're used to seeing with a standard score with a mean of 100 and standard deviation of 15, percentile ranks, age equivalents, descriptive classifications, and percent correct. One of the things I thought was important in the very first edition of the BBCS, published in 1984, was my inclusion of a concept development guide. We called it the parent-teacher form back then. But the concept development guide is your opportunity as an examiner to identify all the concepts that a child knew or did not know on the test. Those concepts that are listed as mastered in most situations or not mastered in most situations. The importance of this is that after completing the form, you can provide the form, the completed form, to parents and to teachers, and they can begin teaching the concepts that the child did not know. So unlike an intelligence test where you would never teach the content of a test, the BBCS allows you to teach the concepts that are on the test, not the items, but the concepts, because that's what it's all about. It's all about the importance of making sure that children understand all of these 320 basic concepts. I'm going to run through the BBCS subtests and talk about how they fit with the educational standards. I'll talk about the subtests, their domains and subdomains, and then provide some examples of the items themselves. In the state of Virginia, where I live currently, the state standards say for colors that children should be able to classify objects according to 1 or 2 attributes, including color. They should be able to identify and explore patterns such as red, blue, and they should describe and sort items by their physical properties, including color. So on the BBCS, we have the subdomains within the color subtest, We measure all 3 primary colors, all 3 secondary colors, and the 3 absolutes. So we have red, yellow, and blue. It's not the Crayola box of Basic 8. We have the 3 secondary colors of orange, green, and purple, and the 3 absolutes, white, black, and gray. And then tertiary colors we sample. The items are administered in a simple pointing response. The primary colors in this format, and more difficult items in the latter format. In Ohio, the state standards for letter recognition and use, it says that with modeling and support, children should recognize and name some of the upper and lowercase letters in addition to those in their first name. And with modeling and support, they should recognize the sounds associated with letters. Well, the BBCS letters subtest measures recognition of uppercase and lowercase letters. The Bracken Basic Concept Scale expressive, which is not being revised at this point, measures the expressive abilities with letter recognition and naming. So we have the naming of uppercase and lowercase letters and letter sounds, as well as letter blend sounds. The administration of the letter subtest follows a format like this. Show me the S, child points. Show me the K, in this case, the lowercase letter. So we have uppercase and lowercase recognition. Georgia standards for numbers matches numerals to sets of objects with the same number from 0 to 10, 1-to-1 correspondence. 10 objects using 1-to-1 correspondence is also a standard. Well, the BBCS numbers and counting subtest has place counting with 1-to-1 correspondence. It has number identification of digits 0 through 9, double digits, and triple digits. And the BBCS expressive includes rote counting and number naming. So a couple examples for the first, show me 3 flowers is 1-to-1 correspondence, and number recognition for two digits, show me 41. Colorado state standards for sizes and comparisons say that children should be able to order objects by size and length. They should be able to classify, compare, and contrast objects, events, and experiences. And they should be able to compare objects using attributes of length and weight and size, such as bigger and longer, taller and heavier. Well, the BBCS size and comparison subtest measures 3-dimensional sizes, big, large, small, little, concepts like those. And also 2-dimensional sizes, both vertical and horizontal. So we have tall and short, and long and short, and many others. And then comparative sizes, similar, same, different, concepts of that manner. Show me the little ball. Show me which one is lighter than the others. Connecticut's standards for shapes say that children should be able to identify and describe a variety of 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional shapes with their mathematical names, importantly. So a child can identify a ball, but they need to be able to identify what a sphere is. And same with box and rectangle and can and cylinder, regardless of the orientation or the size. Connecticut says that children should be able to sort and classify objects by one attribute into 2 or more groups, such as color, size, and shape, and identify 2-dimensional shapes, starting with familiar shapes like circle and triangle. The BBCS measures each of those relative concepts. Trying to find the time. For subdomains, we have linear, such as line and straight. We have curvilinear, curve, diagonal line, diagonal, angular line, angle. We have 2-dimensional shapes and 3-dimensional shapes. Show me which one is round, and show me which ducks are in a row. Mississippi standards for self and social awareness describe self using several basic characteristics such as gender, age, hair color, eye color. identify some similarities and differences in family structure, culture, ability, language, age, and gender, and recognize emotions. BBCS self and social awareness subtest measures affective feelings, such as happy and sad, health and physical concepts, such as healthy and sick and tired, familial relationships, mother, father, sister, age, such as old and young, and mores, such as wrong, right, and correct. Show me which person is anxious. Show me which person is young. State standards for Iowa in direction, position, those relational concepts that are important to navigate around one's environment. It says the child demonstrates the understanding of spatial words such as up, down, over, under, top, bottom, and so forth. The direction position subtest measures approximately 70 relational concepts. And it focuses on three-dimensional concepts such as over, under, right, and left, internal and external concepts like inside and outside, relative proximity, near, far, beside, self and other perspective, my right, your right, my left, your left, front and rear, and specific locations such as edge and corner. Show me which child is stepping into the water, and show me which line is horizontal. Montana's state standards for textures and material says that children should be able to sort natural objects by size, shape, color, smell, texture, etc. These rocks are all round, smooth, and red as their example. And children may arrange a variety of objects into by one or two characteristics such as shape or texture. BBCS measures the common states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas, textures, materials, material characteristics like wet, dry, shiny, and dull, and temperatures. Which one is sharp? Show me which one is bumpy. Main standards for quantity recognizes measurable attributes of objects such as length, weight, and capacity for everyday objects, long, short, tall, heavy, light. Identify whether the number of objects in one group is greater than, less than, or equal to the number of objects in another group. In the quantity subtest, we have a wide variety of quantitative subdomains. We have part-whole relations, relative quantity, volume, multiples, comparatives and superlatives, fractions, and math signs and symbols. Show me which person has the greatest number of chickens. Show me which child is taking another piece of candy. And Hawaii standards for state standards for time and sequence, periods of the day, uses phrases and tense selection appropriately, today, yesterday, tomorrow, and so forth. The BBCS measures a wide variety of temporal subdomains, including mathematical seriation, first, second, third, frequency, once, twice, natural occurring events, temporal absolutes, temporal order, speed, relative age, temporal nuances, and larger temporal periods like days and weeks, months, and seasons. Show me where it is morning. Show me where the meal is over. The BBCS administration is fairly simple. It's a receptive format that requires no verbal response. That receptive nature of the test makes it especially useful for children who are on the autistic spectrum, those who are elective or selective mutes, children who are especially shy and timid, those that may have expressive language difficulties. It's a very useful test, and it also serves as a nice warm-up activity for a more comprehensive measure of intelligence, let's say. The material itself is colorful, stimulating, and developmentally appropriate. It has a consistent appearance and style throughout the test. And I've already talked about the administration times, 20 to 40 minutes for the BBCS, and 15 to 20 minutes for BSRA. Calculating chronological age, if you've used standardized tests, you know how to do this. The only thing I want to point out is that be sure that you borrow 30 days from each month, regardless of the month, and borrow 12 months consistently if you have to borrow from the years. One of the things that makes the BBCS especially robust in terms of its reliability is the use of trial items. We make sure that the child understands the nature of the task before they actually begin taking the test for credit. So we have 4 trial items. If I ask you to show me your shoes, where would you point? Show me your hair. Now show me the floor. And then trial item 4 actually has 4 components to it. It has the 4 quadrants of pictures, and you can go through all 4 of those. Show me the ball. And you want to confirm that the child can identify at least one of the pictures in the 4-picture display. It's important that you not skip these trial items. They are what makes the test as reliable as it is. All subtests conveniently now start at a start point based on the child's chronological age. You introduce the items by saying, show me. Once the child understands the nature of the task, you can drop the show me and just read the stem that goes along with the item. Items with 4 responses are scored, 1 for correct answers, 0 for incorrect answers, and NR and 0 for no responses. You may repeat the item if the child requests a repetition or indicates an uncertainty or does not respond within 10 seconds. This is important to note because the BBCS is not a memory subtest. Repetition does not affect the outcome of the test. Do not repeat the item, however, if a child responds incorrectly. Don't give them a second chance if they did not indicate an uncertainty about their response or they did not ask you to repeat the item. Considerations based on child's responses that are important to the BBCS. If a child shows a perseverative pattern of pointing to response options located in only one quadrant of the stimulus page, point to each of the responses and each of the response options one at a time while saying, look at this picture, look at this one, and this one, and this one. Now show me, and then read the stem. If a child points to more than one option, say to the child, which one is your answer? Show me, and then read the stem. If a child self-corrects, accept the self-correction without comment and score the item as correct. If a child initially responds with the correct response and then changes to an incorrect response, accept the incorrect response and move on. Recording responses and scoring, you can see this option allows you both to score the item 1 and 0 and to write the response in if the child indicates a color that is different than the correct response. The easy peasy part of administering the BBCS is the consistency. All the start points are based on the child's chronological age. There's a basal rule that's consistent. 3 consecutive items passed establishes a basal. And discontinuation rule and the discontinuation point has 3 consecutive items on subtests 1 through 6 and 4 consecutive items failed on subtests 7 through 10. The record form provides you with this graphic that allows you to have more assessment data than you might ever want to look at. It provides subtest scale scores, composite standard scores for the school readiness composite and the total receptive total test composite, confidence intervals, percentile ranks, growth scale values, age equivalents, and descriptive classifications that describe the child's conceptual knowledge as being very delayed through very advanced. I had alluded to the fact that the BBCS has high reliability. Going back to tests and measurements class that you had in graduate school, you'll remember that internal consistency produces the percent or proportion of variance that is true and reliable. The remainder of that variance is considered error variance. So when you use a test that has 0.6 reliability, only 60% of the variance is reliable, 40% is error. With the BBCS, you have the highest possible reliabilities. For the two scales, the receptive and the receptive total test and receptive SRC, the reliabilities range from 0.96 to 0.99. That means between 1 and 4% error variance. And that's consistent across all the age levels. You'll see that the average reliability across the age levels go from 0.93 to 0.98 for the subtests alone. Now, the rule of thumb is that in order to use a test for placement and eligibility decision making, the test must have reliability of 0.9 or better. Virtually every subtest and both scales across all age levels meet that criteria or border on it, with one or two exceptions. High reliability yields low standard errors of measurement. Low standard errors of measurement yields high confidence in the test and the test score. The BBCS has remarkably low standard errors due to its remarkably high reliabilities. We looked at the reliability of the BBCS across special groups, those with language impairments, developmental delays, and gifted and talented subjects. And you can see that the test has exceptional reliabilities for those children with language impairments. Now, there is no such thing as a 1.0 correlation for reliability because all tests have some error. But in this case, the reliabilities were so high that at the third place beyond the decimal, everything still rounds to 1.0. For developmental delay, also very high, and especially for the scales. And for the gifted and talented, again, very high. 0.95, 0.97, and 1.0 for the receptive total scale. How do you use the BBCS in terms of integrating it with your assessment battery? Well, the test is designed and the strategy is designed such that you can use the BBCS to determine the information within and across multiple concept categories. You can look at the concepts that were passed and failed on the achievement tests, the language tests, the intelligence tests, and the BBCS, and look for consistency to determine relative strengths and weaknesses. You can determine the child's developmental trajectory by looking at concepts that were uniformly passed across instruments or failed across instruments. And you can look at whether a child has mastered the concepts or is in the mastery process. And you can determine if the child understands the concepts and the test directions of other tests. Sometimes you'll have an anomaly where a subtest or a test in general produces lower scores than you would anticipate. You can look at the test directions and look at the BBCS concepts to see how many of those concepts are in the test directions and the average age at which children master those concepts. Using the BBCS in your battery, school psychologists are taught the RIOT assessment process, and RIOT stands for review, interview, observe, and test. But we take that and we put it into the referral. So we look at the referral question and determine what is the referral about and what does it have to do with basic concepts possibly. So not following classroom directions may be a referral. We review the child's school records, look for vision, hearing, and medical reasons for the referral, such as otitis media. We interview appropriate personnel about their impressions. We observe the child in the classroom and observe the child's interactions with others, and the extent to which they follow directions, ask questions, or act confused. And we administer, score, and then integrate the test results across instruments. We compare the test results and identify conceptual strengths and weaknesses. And then importantly, we identify the concepts that need to be taught to the child based on the items that they failed on the BBCS and the other measures. The BBCS correlates well with intelligence tests, as I've pointed out a couple times. And the reason for that is not just that it's a cognitive measure, which it is, and not that it's just, or that it's complex, cognitively complex, which it is, but it also straddles several of the areas in cross-battery assessment using theories of intelligence. The red print you see here are Thurston's primary abilities. He identified global intelligence as being at the heart of the primary abilities, overlapping each of these 6 areas, or 7 areas, whatever it is. Verbal comprehension, reasoning, spatial ability, quantitative ability, processing speed, memory, and verbal fluency. Each of those overlap with each other. So you have verbal reasoning and spatial reasoning, for example, where those 2 categories overlap. A newer model of intelligence, the GFGC model, has a similar configuration, though there's some differences in opinion on the one-to-one match. To me, they seem fairly very similar. So crystallized intelligence is the knowledge that you acquire in more systematic, informal means, like in school, and that comports well with verbal comprehension. The GF, fluid reasoning, fits Thurston's primary ability in reasoning very well. And the GV, visual spatial abilities, overlaps with spatial on Thurston's primary abilities. The quantitative area within the GFGC model, GQ, overlaps with quantitative on Thurston's primary abilities. Processing speed and processing speed both overlap. Short-term memory and memory in Thurston's model overlap. Where there is less overlap is the GA auditory versus verbal fluency, but close enough. Now, how does the BBCS fit into this? Let's take a look. School readiness composite are those concepts that are the crystallized concepts. They're the ones that we typically think to teach before a child goes to school or when they first enter school. They're the crystallized knowledge that kindergarten and preschool offers. For reasoning, we've got time sequence and texture material. Those concepts are not typically taught to children except incidentally. They should be taught systematically, but in general, they're taught in an incidental way. And that's what fluid reasoning is all about. Then we have direction position. Those relational concepts that measure a child's orientation in space, over, under, around, and through, fit the visual spatial domain. And quantitative, BBCS has a quantitative subtest. In fact, not only does it have a quantitative subtest, it has the quantitative subtest and the numbers and counting subtest that are part of the SRC. That's why the BBCS-4 correlates as well with intelligence tests as it does. It measures most of the domains in the current and past models of intelligence. That's also why it correlates well with achievement, because intelligence tests are known to predict academic achievement. And it's also why it correlates well with language tests, because language is all about and part of education. So once you administer the BBCS, what are you going to do with the results? Well, the manual provides 20 evidence-based principles, those empirically supported principles that I referred to early in this presentation that teachers often fail to apply. I've listed a few of them here, but the manual lists all 20 of them. We know from developmental psychology research that we should be teaching positive pole concepts before negative pole concepts. What a positive pole concept is a concept that has more of the defining characteristic than the negative pole. So if you're talking about temperature, hot is the positive pole concept. It has more thermal units than does cold. Fat is a positive pole concept despite our perceptions of fatness, but fat would be a positive pole concept. Thin would be a negative pole concept. tall, because there's more height. Tall is a positive pole concept, and short is a lowercase, or is a negative pole concept. We know also that children learn uppercase letters before lowercase letters. So we should be teaching them block uppercase letters first. Once they master those, the lowercase letters. And they learn numerals 1 through 5 before they learn 6 through 9. They learn three-dimensional sizes, such as big and small, before two-dimensional sizes, such as tall and short. Children identify or if you're going to teach concepts to children, you need to identify and emphasize salient features that define the concept. It's important to focus on the concept's salient features and disregard and not mention those features that are ancillary or secondary. You want to use clear conceptual examples and non-examples. If you were teaching the concept of a dog, for example, a collie or a dog of that sort, blocking on the other dog breeds, but a collie would make a good example of a dog. And then a non-example, good examples would be a fish and a bird. And once the child understands the characteristics and concept salient features of a dog, you can then narrow down the exceptions and the examples and non-examples. You want to teach related concepts in pairs or groupings. So over, under, around, and through could be taught together. Up and down should be taught together. Heavy and light, and fast and slow. Again, teaching the positive pole concept first, and then contrasting it with the negative pole concept. It's important that you use rich language when you're working with children. We know that families from lower socioeconomic homes tend to use impoverished language. They may say, "Give me the book," or "Give me that," and point. That's short on the number of concepts that a child needs to hear. Rather, what we should be doing is using as many concepts in our directions as possible. So a teacher might say, "Someone bring me the big, thick, red book on the corner of my desk. It's a heavy book. Who can carry such a heavy book?" Look at all the concepts that are in those directions. Even if the child has not been taught those concepts, they begin to learn them incidentally. Rich language is what gives many children an advantage when they come to school over other children. We have impoverished language and rich language, and it doesn't necessarily go with socioeconomic status or race or ethnicity. It goes to the way that parents talk to their children. And you want to reinforce generalizations by using increasingly more abstract applications. Because these are basic concepts and they're presented in the most basic form, you have to recognize that a child may understand the word under, for example, in certain contexts, and that is a ball that is under a table. That's easily seen, and easily described, and easily recognized. But then you talk about something like under my shirt. Well, in that case, they can't see what's under your shirt, and it's a vertical surface, and there's something over it, and there's no space to show that one is under the other. And then we use the concept like under the water. Well, it's not really under the water, it's in the water, but under the surface of the water is what we mean. So if you've gone under the water, you've gone under the surface. And then we get to under as in underappreciated or underloved or underpaid or forms of that nature. So what you want to do is once the child has mastered the concept at the very basic level, begin more and more abstract applications of that concept. And then importantly, go back to the concept development guide. Use the updated guide to facilitate the transition from testing to teaching and deficit to remediation. Identify all the concepts the child did not know and the ones that he or she did know, and let the parent and the teacher begin teaching those concepts. We have some resources here in your handout. One is the Early Childhood State Standards article I talked about with the 50 state standards. And we have a variety of assessment resources, psychoeducational assessment of preschool children, the textbook, some articles that deal with, and chapters that deal with assessing early childhood cases. And we have some teaching resources using the Bracken Basic Concept Scale and materials and principles and procedures. Thank you for attending this presentation, and thank you for your interest in basic concept acquisition. The importance of basic concept acquisition cannot be overstated. The BBCS happens to measure that fairly small universe of concepts. But whether you use the BBCS or not, make sure that you're teaching children all of the concepts that they need to know as early as possible. Thank you for your attendance. Goodbye.